The door to apartment 4B swung open, and my entire world collapsed in absolute silence. I'd been married to Linda for 11 years. I thought I knew her face better than my own reflection. I could describe every freckle, every laugh line, every expression she made when she was happy or sad or pretending to be interested in something I was saying. But standing in that doorway, looking at the man who answered, I realized I didn't know her at all. "Can I help you?" He had an Italian accent, smooth as aged whiskey. Dark curly hair, artfully disheveled. A fitted charcoal sweater that probably cost more than my first car. And the kind of jawline that belonged on a cologne advertisement. Sharp, symmetrical, designed by God or genetics to make women forget their own names. For 6 months, my wife had described her Italian teacher as a stern woman in her 50s. Gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. Reading glasses perpetually perched on her nose. A strict disciplinarian who reminded Linda of her grandmother. "Signora Benedetti is relentless," Linda had told me just last week, rolling her eyes with theatrical exhaustion. She made me repeat the same verb conjugation 40 times until I got the accent right. This man was 30 years old, if that, and his name wasn't Signora anything. "I'm looking for Linda," I said. My voice came out steady. 8 years in the army teaches you to control your reactions when your brain is screaming. You learn to breathe through the chaos, to lock down your face, to become stone when everything inside you is fire. "I'm a friend." Thought I'd surprise her by picking her up from class. The man smiled warmly. Genuine, unsuspecting. "Ah, you just missed her. She left maybe 20 minutes ago." He stepped back slightly, and I caught a glimpse of his living room over his shoulder, the details registered with military precision. 2 wine glasses on the coffee table, one with lipstick on the rim. Coral sunset, Linda's shade, the one she applied every morning at the bathroom mirror while I pretended not to watch. Candles on the mantel, recently blown out. The wax still glistening, not yet solidified. Soft jazz playing from a speaker somewhere, the kind of music that belonged in a seduction scene, not a language lesson. "That's too bad," I managed. I must have gotten the time wrong. "She usually stays until 9, he said helpfully, leaning against the door frame with casual ease. "Tuesdays and Thursdays, 6 to 9. We've been working on her conversational skills. She's really blossoming, you know? So natural with the language. Some students struggle for years, but Linda..." He smiled again, and something dark and sharp twisted in my chest. "Linda has a gift." 3 hours. Not the 1-hour class Linda had described. Not at the community center downtown, where she told me the lessons took place. A public building with fluorescent lights and folding chairs, and middle-aged people learning Spanish and Mandarin in crowded classrooms. This was a residential apartment building 15 miles from there, in an upscale neighborhood where the doormen wore better suits than most lawyers, and the lobby smelled like money. "I'll catch her at home then," I said. "Thanks for your help." "Of course. I'm Luca, by the way. Luca Benedetti. And you are?" I paused. Some instinct, honed by years of military training, told me not to give him my real name. Don't let the enemy know your position. Don't give them information they can use against you. "James," I said. "Nice to meet you." I shook his hand. It was soft, manicured. He'd never worked a day of hard labor in his life. Never dug a foxhole or carried a rucksack through the desert or stayed awake for 72 hours because sleep meant death. "Pleasure, James." His smile was bright and false and utterly convinced of its own charm. "Tell Linda I said ciao." I walked down the hallway and took the elevator to the lobby and crossed the marble floors to the parking garage, and the whole time my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. But my face stayed blank. My hands stayed steady. "Gather intelligence," my father's voice whispered in my head. "Understand the battlefield before you engage." I didn't go home. I drove to a parking lot overlooking the city, the same spot where I'd proposed to Linda 12 years ago, back when we were young and stupid and believed that love conquered everything. The city had been smaller then, quieter. We'd sat on the hood of my beat-up Honda and watched the sun set, and I'd fumbled with the ring box while she laughed at my nervousness. "Yes," she'd said before I even finished the question. "Yes, you idiot. Obviously, yes." Now I sat in my German sedan, a car I'd bought 3 years ago when the company finally turned profitable, and stared at the same skyline through the windshield, and I tried to make sense of what I'd just seen. My father's words echoed in my head, the same advice he'd drilled into me since childhood. Never make decisions when you're emotional. Gather intelligence first. The soldier who acts on impulse is the soldier who dies. Dad had been career military, 30 years in the infantry, 3 combat tours, a chest full of medals he kept in a box in the closet and never talked about. He'd taught me that anger was a luxury soldiers couldn't afford, that the man who lost his temper lost the war. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white, and I breathed. I thought about meeting Linda at that charity gala. She'd been 26, a junior marketing coordinator at a PR firm, wearing a borrowed dress and trying to network her way up the ladder. Her smile had been nervous, uncertain, like she didn't quite believe she belonged in a room full of people who could afford the $1,000 a plate dinner. I'd been 32, freshly out of the army, using my inheritance from my grandfather to start a commercial real estate company that everyone said would fail. My business partner Tyler and I had scraped together enough to buy tickets because we'd heard there would be investors there, potential clients, people with money to spend on office buildings and strip malls and industrial parks. Linda had walked up to me at the bar and said, "You look like you hate these things as much as I do." Is it that obvious? Only to someone who feels the same way. We'd talked all night, laughed at the same jokes, discovered we'd both grown up in military families. Her father had been Air Force, stationed at bases across the country. We understood the peculiar isolation of that childhood, the way it made you good at adapting and terrible at roots. She'd believed in me when no one else did. She'd eaten ramen with me when we couldn't afford groceries. She'd held my hand when the first deal fell through and the second one almost broke us. She'd been my partner, my anchor, my home. Or so I'd thought. I remembered the last 2 years. The growing distance between us, so gradual I'd barely noticed until suddenly we were strangers sharing a house. Her complaints that I worked too much, that I was never present, that she felt like a ghost in her own marriage. I'd tried to change, cut back my hours, came home for dinner instead of working until midnight, planned weekend trips that she always seemed too tired to enjoy. 6 months ago, she'd announced she wanted to learn Italian. "I need something for myself," she'd said, curled up on the couch with a glass of wine. "Something that's just mine. A way to better myself. You understand, don't you?" I'd encouraged it, told her it was a great idea, paid for the lessons without asking to see the receipts or verify the location. Why would I? She was my wife. I trusted her. What a fool I'd been. I pulled out my phone and called Tyler Brooks. Tyler had been my best friend since our Army days. We'd served together in logistics, spent 2 tours watching each other's backs, and when I started the company, he'd left his job as an FBI financial crimes analyst to become my partner. He handled the numbers, the contracts, the fine print that made my eyes glaze over. I handled the deals, the handshakes, the client dinners that were really negotiations in disguise. He was the smartest person I knew, and more importantly, he was the most loyal. In 11 years of partnership, he'd never once let me down. He answered on the second ring. "Carter, it's almost 11. Everything okay?" "No," I said. "I need your help. Can you meet me at the office tomorrow morning? Early?" There was a pause. Tyler knew me well enough to hear what I wasn't saying. "I'll be there at 7, he said. "Whatever it is, we'll figure it out." The office was empty when I arrived at 6:30 the next morning. I made coffee, strong, black, the kind that tastes like survival, and pulled the blinds and waited. Tyler showed up at 6:55, carrying 2 breakfast sandwiches from the deli downstairs and 2 cups of coffee strong enough to strip paint. He took one look at my face, the hollow eyes, the rigid jaw, the particular stillness of a man holding himself together by force of will, and handed me my sandwich without a word. We sat across from each other at the conference table, the same table where we'd closed our first $1 million deal, where we'd toasted our first building acquisition with cheap champagne, where we'd planned the expansion that turned our struggling startup into a company worth real money. "You look like death warmed over," Tyler said finally. "When's the last time you slept?" "Couple hours, maybe 3. "That bad?" "Worse." He unwrapped his sandwich but didn't take a bite. Just sat there, waiting. That was the thing about Tyler. He knew when to push and when to let silence do the work. I told him everything. I laid it out methodically, the way we used to brief operations in the service. The 6 months of Italian lessons. The description of the teacher that didn't match the man I'd met. The wine glasses, the candles, the 3-hour sessions twice a week. The address that was nowhere near the community center Linda claimed to attend. Tyler listened without interrupting, his breakfast sandwich forgotten in front of him. When I finished, his face was unreadable, the FBI mask he'd learned to wear during interrogations. "You're sure about what you saw?" "I'm sure. And you want to know everything, all of it, even if it's worse than you're imagining." "Yes?" He leaned forward, his eyes serious. "Carter, listen to me. Once you go down this road, you can't come back. You can't unknow what you find out. If she's been..." He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "If she's been unfaithful, really confirming it changes things. In your head, in your heart, legally. You sure you want that?" I thought about Linda coming home tonight, kissing my cheek, telling me about her strict teacher and her difficult homework. I thought about lying next to her in bed, wondering whose name she was thinking when she closed her eyes. I thought about the wine glasses, the candles, the way Luca had smiled when he talked about how gifted my wife was. "I need to know what I'm dealing with," I said, "before I decide what to do." Tyler nodded slowly. "All right. I still have contacts from the bureau. Let me make some calls, run some background on this Luca Benedetti. Give me a few days." "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." He picked up his sandwich, looked at it, set it back down. "And Carter? Don't do anything stupid in the meantime. Don't confront her. Don't tip your hand. Just be normal. Be normal. Right? How do you act normal when your whole life has been revealed as a lie?" That night, Linda came home at 9:30, smelling of perfume that wasn't hers, and wine that matched the glasses I'd seen in Luca's apartment. I was on the couch pretending to watch a basketball game. The Knicks were losing, probably. I hadn't registered a single play. "How was class?" I asked, not looking up. She dropped her purse on the table and stretched, the picture of exhausted satisfaction. "Brutal. Signora Benedetti is such a taskmaster." She laughed, that bright, easy sound I used to love. She made me conjugate verbs for an hour straight. Past progressive, future perfect, all the complicated ones. My brain is completely fried. I forced a smile. "Sounds tough." "The worst." She crossed the room and kissed my forehead, her lips cool against my skin. "I need a shower and about 12 hours of sleep. Don't wait up for me, okay?" "Sure." She walked toward the bathroom, humming something under her breath. An Italian love song, probably. Something Luca had taught her between conjugations. I watched her go, and I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger, not yet. Something worse. The terrible clarity of seeing someone you love become a stranger before your eyes. She lied to my face without a flicker of hesitation. She looked me in the eyes and invented a stern old woman who didn't exist, complete with fabricated homework and fake verb conjugations. She did it smoothly, naturally, as if she'd been practicing deception as diligently as she'd been practicing Italian. Maybe more diligently. I pulled up our joint credit card statement on my laptop while she showered. I'd paid for her lessons without question, trusted her completely, never thought to check. The receipts told a story. There were no charges for any Italian class, no payments to a community center or language school, no professional tutoring fees. Instead, I found Venmo transfers, monthly payments to LB Tutoring LLC, $400 a month for 6 months. LB, Luca Benedetti. The amount was 3 times what a normal group class would cost. The kind of rate you pay for personal attention. Private sessions. One-on-one instruction. I heard the shower shut off. I closed the laptop and arranged my face into something resembling normal. Gather intelligence, my father's voice whispered. Understand the battlefield. I had a long way to go. Tyler's report arrived 4 days later. We met at the office again, early morning, the building silent around us. He slid a manila folder across my desk with the gravity of a man delivering a death sentence. It's worse than you think, he said. Luca Benedetti, 31 years old. Born in Milan, educated at the University of Bologna, arrived in the United States 4 years ago on a work visa. His sponsor was a language school called Bella Italia Learning Center, a name that meant nothing to me at the time. Officially, he was employed as a private tutor and cultural consultant, whatever that meant. His declared income was $40,000 a year, modest for someone living in a $3,200 a month apartment in one of the nicest neighborhoods in the city. The math doesn't add up, Tyler said. He's spending more than he makes, a lot more, unless he has income that isn't being declared. What kind of income? Tyler hesitated. I found at least 4 other private students over the past 3 years. All married women. All wealthy or married to wealthy men. He pointed to a name on the page. This one, Emily Patterson. Her husband William is a dentist. Successful practice, nice house in the suburbs, 2 kids. He divorced her 2 years ago, citing infidelity. The other man in the divorce filing? Luca Benedetti. I stared at the name. You're saying this is a pattern? I'm saying this is a business model. Tyler's voice was grim. He finds women in unhappy marriages, makes them feel special, desired, alive again. The lessons are real at first. He's actually fluent, actually a decent teacher. But they become something else. And somewhere along the way, money starts flowing in his direction. How much money? That's what I'm still trying to figure out. I met William Patterson 3 days later at a coffee shop downtown. Tyler had made initial contact under a business pretext, something about a potential real estate deal. But when Luca's name came up, Patterson had agreed to meet almost immediately. He was a slight man in his 50s, with the haunted look of someone who'd been through a war and lost. His hands shook when he lifted his coffee cup. His eyes kept darting to the door, like he expected someone to walk in and catch him talking. I know why you're here, he said before I could explain. The Italian teacher. The lessons that weren't lessons. I nodded. Let me save you some time. He set down his cup and looked at me with empty eyes. My wife Emily started taking Italian 4 years ago. Said she wanted to travel, see the world, experience la dolce vita. She'd always dreamed of Italy, the food, the art, the romance. I thought it was a nice hobby, something to make her happy. How long before you noticed something was wrong? 6 months, maybe 7. He laughed bitterly. I was oblivious at first. She seemed happier, more energetic. I thought the lessons were good for her. Thought she was finally finding herself, whatever that means. His voice hardened. Then I saw the phone bill. What did you find? Texts, hundreds of them. Every day, all day, and calls, late at night, sometimes 2 or 3 in the morning, lasting an hour or more. I confronted her, and he shook his head. She told me she'd found her soulmate, that she'd never felt so alive, that I was holding her back from her true self. Did she leave? She moved into his apartment, posted photos on social media about her new life, her new love, her Italian Renaissance. He spat the word like a curse. All our friends saw it, all our family. She didn't even try to be discreet. What happened then? 3 months later, he dumped her, found his next student. William's hands tightened around his cup. Emily came crawling back, begging for forgiveness, crying about how she'd made a mistake, how she'd been manipulated, how she didn't know what she was thinking. Did you take her back? No. His voice was flat, final. By then I'd seen the bank statements, the gifts, the trips, the rent payments she'd been making on his behalf. Over $40,000 in 1 year. Jesus. She tried to explain it. Said Luca had made her feel things she hadn't felt in years. That our marriage had become stale, routine, lifeless. That she needed passion, romance, adventure. He laughed bitterly. Adventure. That's what she called it. Writing checks to her lover while our kids were saving their allowance for college. Where is she now? Renting an apartment across town, working part-time at a boutique, seeing the kids every other weekend? His jaw tightened. She texts me sometimes, says she's sorry, asks if there's any chance we could try again. Is there? No. He looked up at me, and there was something dark in his eyes. Not anger, but something worse. Pity. For me. I learned something these past 2 years. You can forgive someone and still not want them in your life. You can understand why they did what they did and still never trust them again. What Emily did. It wasn't a mistake. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is saying something hurtful in an argument. What she did was calculated. She chose him over me, over our kids, over everything we built together. Every day for a year, she made that choice. We sat in silence for a moment. One piece of advice, he said finally. Don't waste time wondering if you could have prevented it. Don't torture yourself with what-ifs and if-onlys. Whatever problems existed in your marriage, whatever distance had grown between you, that doesn't justify what she did. Nothing justifies betrayal. I appreciate that. And one more thing. He leaned forward, his eyes intense. Document everything. Every text, every email, every suspicious charge. When you go to divorce court, and you will go to divorce court, you'll want a paper trail a mile long. Don't give her any room to spin herself as the victim. I drove home in silence, William's words echoing in my head like a bell tolling. She wasn't seduced, she was conned, and she helped him do it every step of the way. The question I couldn't answer, was Linda a victim or a willing accomplice? I hired a private investigator named Rachel Simmons. Tyler knew her from his FBI days, thorough, discreet, professional. She'd spent 15 years tracking down insurance fraud and cheating spouses, and she had a reputation for delivering results without drama. We met in her office, a small space above a dry cleaner that smelled faintly of chemical solvents. She listened to my story with the detached interest of a doctor hearing about symptoms. You understand this won't be pretty, she said when I finished. Whatever I find, you'll have to live with. No takebacks, no pretending you didn't see it. I understand. And you're sure you want to proceed? Sometimes ignorance really is bliss. I'm sure. She nodded and pulled out a notepad. 1 week of surveillance. Documentation of everything. Photos, video where possible, timestamps, locations. At the end of the week, you'll have a complete picture. What you do with it is your business. Her report arrived 7 days later. A thick folder, heavy with photographs and documentation. I opened it in my car, parked in an empty lot, my hands steady even as my heart raced. The details were clinical, precise. Linda arrived at Luca's apartment Tuesdays and Thursdays at 5:30 p.m., not 6 hour, as she told me. She left at 10 p.m., not 8 hour, as she claimed. The extra hours added up to 12 per week, 72 per month. Hundreds of hours I thought she was learning vocabulary and verb tenses. On Saturday, March 22nd, Linda told me she was having brunch with her girlfriends. "Just us girls," she'd said, kissing my cheek. "We need a gossip session." Rachel followed her to Luca's apartment. She arrived at 10:15 a.m. She left at 4 p.m., 6 hours. Not brunch, not gossip. 6 hours in his apartment on a Saturday afternoon while I sat home waiting for her, checking my phone, wondering why she wasn't responding to my texts. The photographs were clinical, detached. Linda and Luca leaving his building together, his hand on her lower back. A possessive gesture, intimate, familiar. Them sitting at a sidewalk cafe, laughing at some private joke. Her leaning in to kiss his cheek, her eyes closed, her face radiant with happiness I hadn't seen in years. I stared at that last photo for a long time. She looked beautiful, young, alive, like the woman I'd married, the one I'd thought was gone forever, lost somewhere in the years of distance and disappointment. She'd found her again, just not with me. "There's more," Rachel said when I called to thank her. Her voice was carefully neutral, professional. I did some digging into Luca's work visa. He's sponsored by a company called Bella Italia Learning Center. On paper, it's a language school. On paper? The listed address is a P.O. box. There's no physical location, no other employees, no actual classes offered to the public. She paused. The school was incorporated 8 months ago, 2 months before your wife started her lessons. Who incorporated it? That's the interesting part. I heard papers shuffling on her end. The registered director of Bella Italia Learning Center is Linda Reynolds. The phone slipped in my hand. I caught it, gripped it tight. "My wife," I said. "My wife created the company." "It appears so." I spent the next week pulling at threads, watching the tapestry of my marriage unravel. The LLC had been funded with $15,000 from our joint savings. Money Linda had transferred without telling me, buried in a month when several other large expenses had made the bank statement hard to parse. Through the company, she'd been paying Luca's rent, his car lease, his phone bill, his gym membership. Line items disguised as contractor payments and business development expenses. Total funds diverted, $58,000 in 8 months. But that wasn't the worst of it. I found a folder on her laptop one evening while she was in the shower. She'd left it logged in, open on the kitchen counter, trusting that I'd never look. The folder was labeled Personal Documents, the kind of innocuous name designed to deflect curiosity. Inside were emails between Linda and a divorce attorney. The initial consultation had been 5 months ago, 1 month after the lessons began, long before I had any suspicion. "My husband is emotionally unavailable," she'd written. "He prioritizes work over our relationship. I feel invisible in my own marriage. He provides financially, but offers nothing emotionally. I need to protect myself before I file for divorce." The attorney's response was professional, sympathetic. "I understand your situation. Many women find themselves in similar circumstances. I recommend you begin documenting instances of emotional neglect. Specific dates, specific incidents, your emotional state afterward. This documentation will be valuable when we proceed. In the meantime, minimize traceable asset transfers and establish independent income sources. When the time comes, we'll ensure you receive the settlement you deserve." I read the emails 3 times, my hands steady even as something cold settled in my chest. This wasn't a woman swept off her feet by a charming foreigner. This wasn't a midlife crisis or a moment of weakness or a marriage falling apart in real time. Linda had been planning to leave me for months, probably years. She'd created the LLC to funnel our money to her lover. She'd positioned herself as the victim, me as the villain. She'd constructed a narrative where I was the emotionally abusive workaholic husband and she was the neglected wife finally finding the courage to escape. She'd done it all while sleeping beside me every night, kissing me goodbye every morning, telling me she loved me with those lying lips. If the enemy has a plan, my father's voice said, you need a better one. David Whitmore was the best divorce attorney in the city. His office occupied the entire top floor of a downtown high-rise with floor-to-ceiling windows and furniture that cost more than most people's cars. His retainer alone was $20,000, and his hourly rate was more than I'd made in my first year out of the Army. But his reputation was worth every penny. Ruthless efficiency, meticulous preparation, and an unbroken record in contested divorce proceedings. He reviewed the documents I'd brought with the dispassionate interest of a surgeon examining X-rays. When he finished, he set down the folder and looked at me with sharp, assessing eyes. The adultery itself won't affect the settlement much in this state, he said. No-fault divorce laws mean infidelity has limited legal relevance. But the dissipation of marital assets, that's a different story entirely. Meaning what? Meaning the money she funneled through that LLC, the payments to her lover, the rent, the car, all of it, that's recoverable. When a spouse diverts marital funds to benefit a paramour during the marriage, the court can factor that into the division of assets. He leaned back in his chair. In plain English, she doesn't get to spend $58,000 on her boyfriend and then demand half of what's left. What about my company? You started it before the marriage with inheritance funds. It's protected as separate property, provided you haven't commingled assets. He raised an eyebrow. You haven't, have you? Tyler handles the finances. He's been paranoid about keeping things separate since day one. Then your business remains yours. He made a note on his legal pad. Here's my advice. Don't confront her yet. She doesn't know you know. The moment you tip your hand, she'll start hiding assets, deleting evidence, coordinating with her attorney. She'll have time to prepare her defense, spin her narrative, position herself as the victim. So what do? You wait. You watch. You gather everything you can while she still thinks she's in control. He smiled, a cold expression that didn't reach his eyes. Then, when we're ready, we strike first and strike hard. She won't know what hit her until it's too late. So I played the oblivious husband. For 3 weeks, I wore the mask of a man who didn't know his marriage was already over. I went to dinner parties with Linda on my arm, making small talk with couples we'd known for years. I listened to her jokes and laughed at the right moments and pretended I didn't notice the way she checked her phone every few minutes, probably waiting for texts from him. I made love to her twice because refusing would have raised suspicion, and both times I felt like I was betraying myself. At night, I lay beside her in the darkness, staring at the ceiling while she scrolled through her phone, probably messaging her lover, making plans for their future while I pretended to sleep. I watched her drift off with a smile on her face, dreaming of her Italian escape, her fresh start, her grand romance. And I planned. I installed a voice-activated recorder in my home office, legal in our one-party consent state, since I was present for any conversations it captured. I started working late more often, staying behind the closed door with my ear pressed to the crack, listening. The recording that mattered came on a Thursday night. Linda thought I was buried in spreadsheets, the workaholic husband she'd described to her attorney. She sat in the living room, phone pressed to her ear, voice low, but not quite low enough. He doesn't suspect anything, she said. I'm telling you, he's completely oblivious, too focused on his precious company to notice what's happening under his own roof. A pause while Luca responded. A few more months, that's all I need. Time to move more funds without raising red flags. Then I'll file and we can finally be together. Another pause. Longer this time. No, I know exactly what I'm doing. I've been talking to my lawyer for months. I'm going to claim emotional neglect, maybe even abuse. Nothing physical, nothing that needs evidence. Just the slow erosion of a woman's spirit by an unfeeling husband. I sat in my office, perfectly still, barely breathing. He'll be so blindsided he won't know what hit him. And by the time he figures out what's happening, I'll already have what I need. She laughed. The same laugh I'd fallen in love with, now twisted into something ugly. Trust me, baby. This time next year we'll be in Rome, just like we planned. The recording ended. I saved it to 3 different locations: my laptop, an encrypted cloud folder, a USB drive I hid in my office safe. Then I went back to my spreadsheets and pretended nothing had changed. Patience, my father's voice said. The sniper who fires too early misses his target. Rachel continued her surveillance, and 2 weeks later she called with unexpected news. Your wife's boyfriend has another woman. I almost laughed. After everything, laughter seemed like the only appropriate response. What? Jessica Palmer, 28 years old, marketing associate at a firm downtown? Rachel's voice was professionally neutral, but I caught a hint of something underneath. Maybe satisfaction at unraveling another layer of deception. They've been together about a year, from what I can determine. She appears to be his actual girlfriend. Dinners, overnights at his apartment, couple photos on social media. Does Linda know? Based on my observations? Absolutely not. She believes she's his only serious relationship, that the other students are just income, just marks. But she's different. She's special. I let that sink in. Luca was running multiple games simultaneously. The married students he seduced for money, and the younger girlfriend who thought she was his real partner. Linda had convinced herself she was his future, his soulmate, his escape from the transactional nature of his tutoring business. She was just another mark, just another lonely woman with access to her husband's bank accounts. Keep watching, I told Rachel, and document everything. April 26th, Saturday morning. Linda announced she was meeting her girlfriends for brunch. Same lie, different day. She stood in front of the mirror, applying her lipstick, coral sunset, the shade I'd seen on the wine glass in Luca's apartment, and chattering about which restaurant they'd chosen. Sarah's been wanting to try that new place on 5th Street, she said, blotting her lips with a tissue. The one with the amazing Eggs Benedict. Should be fun. I watched her from the doorway, memorizing every detail. The careful makeup, the casual sundress that probably cost $300, the perfume she never wore for me. Sounds great, I said. Have fun. She kissed my cheek at the door. A quick peck, automatic, meaningless. Don't wait up. You know how we get when we start gossiping. I know. I watched her drive away. Then I went to the living room and waited. She came home at 4:15, shopping bags from Nordstrom in hand, a cover story, props for the performance. Her face was flushed, her hair slightly disheveled, her eyes bright with the particular satisfaction of a woman who'd spent the afternoon somewhere she didn't want her husband to know about. She froze when she saw me sitting in the armchair, a manila folder on the coffee table in front of me. Carter? I thought you'd be at the office. How was brunch? I asked. Great. Really great. She set down the bags, her smile flickering with uncertainty. We went to that new place on 5th Street. The Eggs Benedict were amazing. You should try them sometime. Sarah sends her love. Does she? Yeah, she... Linda stopped. Something in my voice, some coldness she'd never heard before, finally registered. Carter, what's going on? Why are you looking at me like that? I opened the folder, slid the first photograph across the table. It showed Linda entering Luca's apartment building at 10:17 that morning. Timestamp in the corner. Her face clearly visible, No room for doubt. This is you, I said. Today, 6 hours ago. Her face went pale. Where did you get that? I slid the second photograph. Linda and Luca leaving together, his arm around her waist, her head tilted toward his shoulder. You arrived at 10:15 a.m. You left at 3:47 p.m. You stopped at Nordstrom on the way home to buy those bags you're holding, probably to make it look like you'd been shopping with friends. Carter, I can explain. Can you? I slid more photos across the table. Their cafe dates, their intimate lunches, the way she looked at him, like he'd hung the moon and stars and she couldn't believe her luck. Can you explain 6 months of lies? Can you explain Signora Benedetti, the strict teacher in her 50s who doesn't exist? Linda opened her mouth, closed it. Can you explain Bella Italia Learning Center? Her face went from pale to ashen. Oh yes, I said. I know about the LLC. I know you incorporated it 8 months ago, 2 months before your lessons even started. I know you've been using it to pay his rent, his car, his phone, his gym membership. $58,000 of our money. It's not what you think? I know about your divorce attorney, Linda, the consultations that started 5 months ago, the strategy sessions about how to paint me as emotionally abusive, the advice about minimizing traceable assets and establishing independent income. She was shaking now, her whole body trembling. But I wasn't finished. I know about the phone calls, the late nights when you thought I was asleep. He doesn't suspect anything. This time next year we'll be in Rome. I leaned forward. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Did you really think you were that clever? Tears streamed down her face. Real ones, maybe. Or maybe just another performance. She'd proven she was capable of faking anything. You had me followed, she said, her voice climbing toward hysteria. You recorded me in my own home. That's a violation. You had no right. Of what? Your privacy? Your right to betray me without consequences? I shook my head. Everything I did was legal. I checked with 3 attorneys. One-party consent state. My home, my office, my recordings. But what you did, the fraud, the embezzlement, the conspiracy to lie to a judge about abuse, that's a different story entirely. I wasn't going to. Don't. My voice came out flat, cold. The voice I'd used in the army when I needed soldiers to listen. Don't lie to me again. I've heard the recordings. I've seen the emails. I know exactly what you were planning. You don't understand, she said, her voice breaking. You're twisting everything. Twisting what? The LLC you created without telling me? The $58,000 you funneled to your boyfriend? The divorce strategy you've been planning for 5 months? I stood up. I'm not twisting anything, Linda. I'm just finally seeing clearly. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Tears streamed down her face. Real ones, maybe. Or maybe just another performance. She'd proven she was capable of faking anything. You don't know what it's been like. Coming home to an empty house every night, eating dinner alone, lying in bed next to someone who's thinking about spreadsheets instead of me. So you stole from me. You lied to me. You planned to destroy my reputation in court. I was protecting myself. You're so wrapped up in that company, in your deals and your buildings and your bottom line. When's the last time you actually looked at me? When's the last time you made me feel like I mattered? You mattered every single day, Linda. Every time I worked late, I was building something for us. Every deal I closed, every building I bought, that was our future, our security, our life together. A life I never wanted, she was shouting now, the mask completely gone. I wanted a husband, not a business partner. I wanted romance, not revenue reports. I wanted someone who looked at me the way Luca does. The way Luca looks at his bank account, you mean? That stopped her cold. What? Did you think you were special? I asked quietly. Did you think you were different from all the other women he's done this to? Emily Patterson, Sarah Thornton, Maria Delacroix, all of them private students, all of them in unhappy marriages, all of them convinced they'd found true love. I watched her face crumble. He has a girlfriend, Linda. An actual girlfriend, not a meal ticket. Her name is Jessica Palmer. She's 28, she's pretty, and she had no idea about any of his married students until a week ago. You're lying. I have photos. I have statements. I have text messages where he talks about going back to Italy once he's saved enough. I paused. You were just another source of income to him. Another mark with access to a joint bank account. Silence stretched between us. Linda stood in the middle of our living room, the room we'd decorated together, the room where we'd hosted holidays and dinner parties and lazy Sunday mornings. And I watched her understand that everything was over. Not just our marriage, her fantasy, her escape, her Italian romance. All of it collapsing like a house built on sand. Carter, please. Her voice was barely a whisper. I know I made mistakes. I know I hurt you. But we can work through this. We can go to counseling. We can... No. Please. Just give me a chance to explain. You've had 6 months to explain, Linda. Instead, you spent them planning how to take everything I have. You spent them lying to my face every single night. You spent them whispering to your lover about how oblivious I am, how easy it would be to blindside me. I picked up the folder. There's nothing left to explain. We're done. Carter? I closed the door behind me and walked away. The next 3 weeks were controlled demolition. Linda hired a new divorce attorney, not the one she'd been consulting in secret, but someone who specialized in damage control when the damage was already done. They reviewed the evidence I'd compiled and advised her to settle quickly. Fighting would only make things worse. The civil suit against Luca became public record, and the local media descended like vultures on fresh meat. Language tutor, accused of systematic marriage destruction. It was lurid, tabloid-ready, exactly the kind of scandal that spread through social circles like wildfire. The story had everything readers loved: betrayal, money, exotic romance, and a villain with an accent. Within hours, it was trending locally. Within days, it had been picked up by national outlets looking for salacious content to fill their news cycles. 2 other former students came forward with similar stories. Different years, same pattern. Vulnerable married women, emotional affairs that became physical, money flowing from their accounts to his, marriages destroyed in the aftermath. Their testimonies were eerily similar to what William Patterson had told me. The initial lessons that felt exciting, illicit. The gradual escalation from student-teacher to something more. The feeling of being special, chosen, awakened after years of marital dormancy. And then the devastating realization that it had all been a performance, that they were just revenue streams with heartbeats. One of the women, Sarah Thornton, gave an interview to a local news station. I watched it in my hotel room, alone with a glass of whiskey I didn't really taste. I thought I was in love, she said, her voice steady but her eyes wet. I thought I'd found something real after years of feeling invisible in my own marriage. Now I know I was just a checkbook to him. He made me feel special because special women write bigger checks. Luca's visa sponsorship came under scrutiny. Immigration investigators discovered that Bella Italia Learning Center was a shell company with no legitimate business purpose. The work visa it sponsored was based on fraudulent claims. There were no other employees, no physical location, no actual language classes offered to anyone who wasn't a wealthy married woman with access to joint accounts. The investigation expanded. Questions were raised about similar schemes in other cities. Luca, it turned out, had left a trail of broken marriages across 3 states before settling here. Tyler kept me updated on the developments. His attorney is advising him to cut his losses, he said during one of our morning briefings. Settle with you. Settle with the other potential plaintiffs. Leave the country before immigration acts. And the other husbands? One is definitely filing suit. The second one decided against it. Doesn't want the publicity. The third is still deciding, but his attorney thinks he'll jump in once he sees the momentum. What about Linda's friends? Her family? Tyler hesitated. That's complicated. Most of her friends have distanced themselves. Word got out about the LLC, about the planning. It's hard to play victim when there's a paper trail showing you created the weapon that destroyed your own marriage. And her family? Her sister called David Whitmore's office. Wanted to know if there was anything she could do to help. She's not on Linda's side anymore. She's on the side of whatever ends this nightmare fastest. I thought about Linda's parents, the Air Force colonel and his elegant wife who'd welcomed me into their family 11 years ago. They'd toasted our wedding with champagne and tears. They'd called me their son. Now their daughter was a cautionary tale being discussed on morning talk shows, and I was the man who'd exposed her. How's Linda taking all this? About how you'd expect. She's isolated, defensive, alternating between anger and despair. Tyler paused. She tried to call you 3 times yesterday. I know, I didn't answer. Probably wise. A week later, Rachel called with a final piece of information. That girlfriend, Jessica Palmer. A reporter contacted her for comment on the story. She gave a statement. Said she had no idea about any of it. The married students, the money, any of it. She thought she was his only relationship. How did she find out? Same way everyone else did. The news coverage. Rachel paused. She also provided text messages. Apparently, Luca had been talking about going back to Italy once he'd saved enough. His words. She thought he meant from tutoring work. Now she knows what he actually meant. So Luca had never intended to stay. Never intended to build a life with Linda or anyone else. He was a tourist in American marriages, extracting what he could before returning home with his pockets full. Linda must have realized that too by now. The great romance she'd sacrificed everything for had never existed at all. Luca's settlement came 3 weeks later. His attorney reached out to David Whitmore with an offer. $35,000, most of his remaining savings, in exchange for dropping the civil suit. A written statement acknowledging the affair and his role in the deterioration of my marriage. Agreement to leave the country within 60 days. I took it. Not because I needed the money, I didn't, but because I wanted him gone. I wanted him on a plane back to Milan before he could find another victim. Before he left, Rachel told me, Luca called Linda one final time. She went to his apartment, Rachel said. Stayed about 20 minutes, left crying, hard. I could imagine the conversation, his fury that she'd gotten him caught, that her foolproof plan had fallen apart, that his comfortable life was over because of her carelessness, her desperate pleas that they could still make it work, still run away together, still have the romance she'd been promised. Later, I learned from a mutual acquaintance what had actually been said. Linda, in a moment of drunken honesty at a bar, had recounted the conversation to anyone who would listen. You told me you had everything under control, Luca had said, his voice cold. You told me your husband was oblivious, that he'd never find out, that we had all the time in the world. Now I'm losing everything because of you. We can still be together, Linda had begged. Come with me. We'll go somewhere else, start over. I'll file the divorce, take whatever I can get, and we'll build a new life. A new life with what? You're going to lose most of what you have in court. You've got no job, no savings of your own, nothing but the scraps your husband's attorney leaves behind. His voice had turned cruel. You're a married woman with nothing now. What would I want with you? The words had hit her like physical blows. All those months of planning, All those whispered promises about Rome and romance and forever, they'd evaporated in an instant. She wasn't his escape from a transactional life. She was the transaction. "But you said you loved me," she'd whispered. "I said what you needed to hear." The line had gone dead. Linda stood alone in his apartment, surrounded by the furniture her money had paid for, in the home her checks had subsidized, finally understanding the truth that everyone else had seen from the beginning. She was just another lesson he'd learned. And now the class was dismissed. The divorce took 2 months to finalize. Without Luca, without her secret strategy, without the narrative she'd planned to spin, Linda had no leverage. Her attorney advised settling quickly to avoid worse outcomes in court. The evidence of fraud and dissipation was too comprehensive to explain away. The final terms were straightforward. The $58,000 she'd funneled to Luca would be deducted from her share of marital assets. The house, purchased with my inheritance, would be sold, with the majority of proceeds going to me. My company, started before the marriage, remained untouched. Linda received a modest lump sum. No alimony, her employment history and earning capacity worked against her, and the documented adultery and financial deception eliminated any sympathy the court might have had. She signed the papers on a gray Thursday afternoon. I wasn't there. David Whitmore handled everything, as he had from the beginning. "She asked about you," David told me afterward on the phone. "Asked if you'd ever consider forgiving her." "What did you tell her?" "I told her that wasn't my area of expertise." 6 months later, I found myself at a charity gala. The same hotel ballroom where I'd met Linda 12 years ago. The same champagne, the same orchestra, the same crystal chandeliers throwing light across rooms full of people making small talk and pretending to care about whatever cause was being celebrated. I stood by the bar, nursing a drink I didn't really want, wondering why I'd come. Tyler had talked me into it. Good for business, good for your image, good for proving you're not hiding in a hole somewhere. But the truth was simpler than that. I needed to prove to myself that I could be here, that this place didn't own me. "You look like a man who'd rather be anywhere else." I turned. The woman beside me was about my age, dark hair swept up in an elegant twist, wearing a green dress that matched her eyes. She looked familiar, but I couldn't place her. That obvious? Only to someone who feels the same way. She extended her hand. "Amanda Cole. We've met before, actually, a long time ago." The name clicked. "Linda's wedding. You were one of her colleagues at the PR firm?" "Art curator now. The firm and I parted ways years ago." She smiled ruefully. "And divorced, as of last year. So we have that in common, apparently." "You heard about—" "Everyone heard about it. The Italian teacher scandal was the most interesting thing to happen in this city in years." She raised her glass. "I'm sorry, by the way. Not because I think you need sympathy. You seem to be doing fine. But because it's a rotten thing to go through." We talked through 2 more drinks, then dinner, then dessert. She had a sharp wit and an easy laugh and didn't ask prying questions about the details that had been all over social media. When I mentioned that I wasn't ready for anything serious, she nodded, like that was the most natural thing in the world. "I'm not either," she said. "Divorce leaves marks, takes time to heal." She handed me her card. "But if you ever want coffee with someone who understands the particular weirdness of starting over at 40, I'm around." I looked at the card, looked at her. "Coffee sounds nice," I said. "When I'm ready." "When you're ready," she smiled. No rush. I saw Linda one more time. It was accidental. A random encounter at a gas station, of all places. She was filling up a sedan I didn't recognize, a practical Honda that was a far cry from the BMW she'd driven during our marriage. She looked different. Older. Tired. The radiance I'd seen in those surveillance photos was gone. "Carter." "Linda." We stood there, Two strangers who'd shared 11 years of marriage with nothing left to say. "I'm moving," she finally said. "Got a transfer to the Denver office. Fresh start." "Good luck with that." Silence stretched. She seemed to want something from me. Forgiveness, maybe, or understanding, or just acknowledgement that what we'd had was real before she destroyed it. "For what it's worth," she said quietly, "I'm sorry. Not the way you think. I mean, I'm sorry for how it ended. For what I became. I never meant for it to—" She trailed off, shaking her head. "I don't know what I meant anymore." I finished filling my tank. Replaced the nozzle. "Take care of yourself, Linda." I drove away without looking back. A year after the divorce was finalized, Tyler showed me an Instagram post. Luca Benedetti, back in Milan, smiling in front of the Duomo with a woman on his arm. She was American, older, dripping with expensive jewelry and the desperate hope of women who think money can buy love. "Some people never change," Tyler said. I closed the app and went back to work. There were deals to close, buildings to buy, a company to run. Life went on. That Saturday, I met Amanda for coffee at the little shop she'd told me about months ago. We sat by the window and talked about nothing important. Movies we'd seen, books we'd read, the particular joy of a well-made espresso on a cold morning. "You seem different," she said. "More settled." "I feel different." I stirred my coffee, watching the cream swirl. "The anger's gone. I thought it would last forever, but it just faded. Now it's just history. Something that happened to someone I used to be. That's healthy. That's therapy. Lots and lots of therapy." She laughed, and I laughed with her. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, the future seemed like something to look forward to instead of something to survive. I didn't know where things with Amanda would go. Maybe nowhere. Maybe somewhere. The point was that I was open to finding out. My father used to say that life was a series of battles, some won and some lost. But he was wrong about that, I think. Life isn't a war, it's just life. Messy, complicated, full of people who hurt each other and people who heal each other, and sometimes the same person doing both. Linda taught me that trust can be broken. Amanda was teaching me that it could be rebuilt. Different lessons, both worth learning. I finished my coffee and ordered another round. The Italian lesson was over. Time to start something new.